cars are exciting, aren't they? It's 2021, and it's hard to argue Tesla's at the apex of electric cars right now, and this is the best, newest, highest-end thing that they make. This is Tesla Model S Plaid. Now, some of you may be wondering, wait, hold on, wait a second. I thought you weren't going to get one, Marques. I did end up getting a Model S Plaid, but a lot of plans have changed. There's no more Plaid Plus. There's other stuff. We have plans for the other one. It's a whole thing. Don't worry, though. This video is not about that. This video is about my real, raw first impressions of the car that now lives at the apex of the electric car tech world right now. It's been a couple days. I got some thoughts, and I had a lot of initial impressions when it got announced. So let's get into it. So I picked up this car on Friday, so a couple days ago by the time you're watching this, and dove directly into the deep end, basically. I immediately, first thing I did was take a 300-mile road trip to Boston for an Ultimate game that actually ended up getting canceled, so turned around and drove 300 miles right back. So I've already spent a lot of time highway driving, city driving, autopilot, performance testing. It allowed me to really get to know this car. So fundamentally, this car is basically the same as previous Tesla Model S. It's the same general shape, which I still think is great. It's still a big four-door sedan, hatchback, tons of storage, the whole thing. But it is refreshed, and this is the Plaid version, which is the newest high-performance version with the new triple-motor powertrain. So on the outside, you can see there's some smaller changes, but you'll notice them. There are even wider tires and wider fender flares to accommodate them, and the whole car itself is now slightly wider. So shout out to the 285s on the front and 295s on the back. These are some seriously big tires. And even if you didn't notice that, the easy way to tell you're looking at the newest version are, number one, the chrome delete. Yes, all the window trim now and the door trim and the handles and places where they used to be chrome are all now blacked out, except for the front and back logos for whatever reason, and the updated front end with a bigger front splitter and new fog lights that match the Model 3 and Model Y. And actually 3, the Plaid logo on the back, although this one has a super limited edition 1 of 25 Plaid visual badge, which is kind of growing on me. I kind of like it. The rest, if you see them on the street, they'll just say Plaid in text. Also, the rear spoiler is a little bigger, just a little bit. Now, before I talk about any of the performance, we should just jump right into the interior for a second, because this is the main change, the main refresh. I feel like I watch probably every video on the internet about, people getting deliveries of these and pointing cameras at them. So I was ready for the yoke. I was expecting it. We've all seen the new horizontal screen. But the one thing that I noticed as soon as I stepped in here that I didn't get from those videos is the new fit and finish, which is very much improved. Now again, the minimal interior is still here, and it's definitely not for everyone. Some people see this and they hate it, but I am very into it. But in this refresh, the materials they've used have all gotten better throughout. The carpet is thicker and softer, the seats have better stitching, and the leather is softer and more comfortable, or the fake leather. Plus they brought ventilated seats back, so there's fans in the seats that blow cool air on you when it's hot. And there's more magnets than ever before, like with the trunk privacy cover and the armrest storage cover. There's just more clicky bits and latches that make sense. And also noticed they really closed up the center a lot more, like a traditional car. There's this big tunnel in the middle. Now it has its pros and cons. The new wireless charger underneath the screen is awesome. It's in a much better place. And this modular multi-level storage system is really cool. The top peels back halfway or all the way. Then the second layer can move back and reveal a deeper section. You can have the cup holders showing or not showing. It's pretty clever. I like it. But something I learned the hard way, and I'm gonna put this in the video so you guys know about this. This little slot right here, right underneath the wireless chargers, that slot, very dangerous. For example, when you get the car, at first you get a little temporary registration, little piece of paper. When you put something paper-sized down on that carbon fiber, there is enough of a gap for stuff to just slip right underneath there. So naturally, that's the first thing I did. I was doing a bunch of stuff, just put the registration there, and it just slipped right underneath and completely disappeared. And I was like, oh, I just lost my registration. It's now somewhere in this tunnel and I'll never get it again. Luckily, somewhere between here and Boston, found a little space, the little highway acceleration, and it just got spit right out the back, right into the back seat like a receipt. It just came sliding out of there. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen every time. I highly suggest you don't lose things underneath there, but just figured I'd mention that if Tesla wants to add like some brushes or like a seal or something like that, that would be better. Speaking of performance though, well, this car is absolutely ridiculous, as you'd probably expect. You've probably heard the numbers already. 1,020 peak horsepower from 80 miles an hour up to 200 miles an hour, although it's electronically limited right now to 163 before a pending software update. The 0 to 60 in 1.99 seconds. It launches fast off the line. Everybody knew that. Electric cars already do that. The most impressive part of this car's acceleration and performance, which I didn't think I'd notice, but I definitely did versus the Raven Model S, is the continuous and repeated pickup after that. So, 0 to 60 in 2.3 versus 1.99, they're both really fast, right? But there's actually a chart that shows the 60 to 130 times, which represent the second part of that acceleration, and the difference is much more obvious. So the 60 to 130 time on the Raven Model S from a couple years back, a ridiculously fast car, was 9.5 seconds from 60 to 130 miles per hour. The 60 to 130 time on PLAID is all the way down to 4.7 seconds. So that's literally twice as fast from 60 to 130. And so there, you absolutely can feel the difference. And it's not even like you're out here on the streets doing 60 to 130 all the time, but when you're on the highway, the difference in like that torque that you can feel and quickly do things that you couldn't feel in previous Model S's is actually very surprising. Like basically it's one thing to see the numbers, like you watch the videos on YouTube, you see the numbers on the speedometer going up and the ludicrous mode and I guess plaid animation at this point. But it's another to know that actually if you take this car to a drag strip, technically if you go to an NHRA sponsored drag strip, if you do the quarter mile in under 10 seconds or at over 150 miles an hour, you need a parachute for that car. Otherwise they won't let you do it. And this car does a standing quarter mile in 154 miles an hour at like 9.3 seconds on a regular basis, so you would get kicked out of a drag strip if you pulled up with this car and just did a regular run. So it's crazy. It's like a different feeling in your chest. The linear acceleration, it's basically a missile. It's ridiculous. And in theory, none of this should matter to regular people. Most people will never use any of that. But it is crazy that an electric car can have that sort of performance, and it's also the car that I went and got groceries in last night, and it handled both those things as good as any car ever could. So on my road trip, I got to deal with a fair bit of daily driving, which in every single way except for one is world class. Cabin noise is great. The new added storage in all the doors and everything is very clutch. The new seats are very comfortable. And on paper, it's the most aerodynamic production car ever. Now I'm looking at my my watt hours per mile. I never really got it down below 300 watt hours per mile like I did in the Raven Model S, but I think a part of that is because of the wheels, the 21-inch tires right now. But I got to this V3 supercharger on the way home with exactly 4 miles of battery left, which is pretty much ideal conditions. And sure enough, I saw it adding 900 miles an hour back to the battery at 250 kilowatts. Now the new screens in this car are actually also very impressive. I say screens plural because there's the two in the front, but there's also now a new screen in the back. I think the back screen, maybe this is a hot take, but I think this is probably one of the most overhyped or overrated features. It's fine. It's great for air conditioner controls and all that, but the second you try to do some of the stuff they're claiming, like playing games on it or watching YouTube videos on it, you start to realize it's a little too small and a little too far away to be really useful or really fun for that sort of stuff. But again, it's nice to have your media controls and stuff back here in such an expensive car. Should be pretty standard. The new screen up front though, I think is great. It's obviously now landscape and much more well integrated in the dashboard than Model 3's landscape screen. And the software is actually even newer and it's much more responsive than the last Model S and even Model 3's. It's really quick and snappy through things like maps and media controls and pulling up the cameras and all that stuff. It's not just lag free, but it's like satisfyingly quick. Even the browser which was pretty slow in all the other Teslas, is acceptable to use now. The new dock at the bottom is the nice part. It's customizable and makes a lot of sense. You end up with your most used toggles there wherever you want them. For me, it's Bluetooth to my phone and Spotify. The energy graph is gone though, which I found really useful, and I suspect that's not coming back. But you want the screen to be good since so much of the controls of the car are up here, and it is. Also, they moved the USB port for the dash cam into the glove box. So if you pop open the glove box, that reveals a hidden USB port and actually include a USB stick for Sentry Mode and dash cam. The only real bug I found is sometimes like resizing or moving the windows around, which is a new feature, can glitch out a little bit or snap the wrong way. This is like one thing that I know they can definitely improve with the software updates, so I'm not super worried about that. So okay, what was the one thing that wasn't world class then? What was the negative about this new car? Well, there's only one thing really that's controversial about the new Model S and X, and that's the steering wheel, or the yoke, the steering yoke. Let's talk about it. So this thing is half a steering wheel. It is wider than you think, and it's a bit rectangular at the corners. And it's got a bunch of touch-sensitive buttons on it instead of the traditional stocks. You know, for blinkers or windshield wipers or headlights, that is all moved to touch buttons. Now, my super early impression, just getting in the car and sitting down, was, okay, I've seen this thing in videos. Let's give it a chance. It's going to be an adventure. I've seen lots of very high praise and lots of criticism. Let me just see what it's like. So now, at this point, I've done 800 plus miles on it. Some of it was highway driving, some of it was suburban driving, some of it was parking, and, you know, pulling around tight spaces and in and out of my driveway and finding superchargers and parking lots, all kinds of fun stuff like that. And basically the number one thing I started to realize was, this is bad. Like, this is gonna take some serious recalibration, and there's so much muscle memory involved here. Like, because everyone's used to a wheel. I myself have 10 years and 100,000 miles of a wheel and stocks of muscle memory. And the yoke isn't actually the part that's bad. It's the touch buttons on the yoke that amplify the relearning of everything. So let's make this easy. I'm just gonna give a pros and cons list of this new control system here, all right? Start with the pros. So technically, one upside of this setup is you do actually have better visibility of the screen behind the wheel, which is always in dark mode for some reason, but this screen was designed to show you information all the time, and I don't know if that was the intended design of the yoke, I just think it happens to be true, but technically, yeah, you can see the screen easier, sure. And I also think it just looks cool as hell. Like, it's such a conversation starter. It feels like a video game controller. Like, everyone who sees the yoke immediately wants to know how it is. And I guess it'll even give you the upside that it also kind of forces you into a textbook driving position with your hands at 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock. Some people might hate that. A lot of people are like hand on top of the wheel drivers, but for safety, this is the best position here for control and best for the airbag and everything. So that's all true. But to me, that's exactly where the upsides end and the laundry list of downsides begin. So first of all, the yoke, obviously you don't have the whole wheel here, so a lot of like grabbing phantom wheel is gonna happen for people. That's fine. You kind of do get used to where you end up putting your hands. But the touch buttons, that was the mistake, because they are touch targets of unknown size versus physical buttons where you know exactly where they're going to be every time. So number one, you're adjusting the way you hold the wheel. Number two, every time you grab the wheel and turn it, your hand brushes some of these buttons. And I've seen it in videos and I didn't realize how common this would be, but it is very common to like brush the blinkers and the headlights and the windshield wipers like as you're making turns, which is pretty annoying. Now I actually think the layout of it, the intuitiveness of the placements is actually fine and pretty easy to get used to. So on the left-hand side, you've got your blinkers, up to go right, down to go left, and there's actually some haptic feedback, so if you do a light hold, you can hold it as long as you want, or a firm press to turn them on. Same thing with the headlights, you can tap it to flash, and on the right side, it's your voice controller button, it's the windshield wiper button, which is a single press for one wipe, or a firm press to turn them on, and then there's a little autopilot indicator that's not actually a button, it just indicates that the right wheel you press in to turn on autopilot, and then there's the horn. And so if you're gonna do this, if you're gonna literally reinvent the wheel here it's the only input people have into the car. So you'd want it to hopefully only adjust small things at a time. This is just a lot to change, and I really think actual clicking buttons would have made a huge difference here. Also, the horn, maybe I'm missing something, but couldn't they have stuck with a regular horn? Because imagine, you're driving, somebody cuts you off or is like about to do something dumb right in front of you. You just have like this reaction to just hit the horn. And that's where the airbags are, and that's where they've always been, but now this like look down and like reach over and hit the horn, I don't know if that's the move I would have made. Everything else is a slow muscle memory remap. And like I said, I'm a pretty tech forward person. I feel like I'm gonna eventually click to the point where I hit the buttons correctly every time. I don't miss the touch targets, and I eventually am as proficient with this as I used to be with the wheel. But people with 40, 50 years of driving experience, 500,000, 1,000,000 miles, it's gonna take them longer, I think, to flip that switch. But there's one other difference that's not even on the steering wheel, and that's just drive modes. So again, there's no stalks here or any drive selector. Anytime you're at low speed and you put your foot on the brake, you get a strip that pops up from the side where you can swipe up to go drive and swipe down to reverse. It's actually fine, but a couple of things. One, it's a little narrow and my muscle memory hasn't really dialed into perfectly hitting it every time yet. And two, the yoke is actually so wide that it kind of blocks part of the view of the corner. It actually naturally cuts off your vision, so you feel like you're reaching around the yoke, which is nice that, you know, that control button in the corner actually also works with a swipe out. But yeah, you kind of feel like that's a little bit of an awkward move. But there are two other solutions to this gear changing problem that feel kind of like even more of a workaround. So one, there are some buttons actually right underneath this wireless charger, and they're fine, but they do take like an extra like second, like a half second while you're pressing them to activate. So they kind of feel a little bit less responsive, but I think that's because they don't want you to like accidentally like brush it and change gears. Although you do need your seatbelt on and your foot on the brake to activate them. Either way, I actually prefer the screen. The other that you might have heard about though is auto shift. And I thought this would be an on all the time thing, but it's a feature in beta that works when the car is in park. And when the car is in park, it will remember how you got into that parking spot or look at what's around you and guess how you'd like to exit park. So if you're in your driveway with a wall in front of you, it will give you the option to tap the brakes and it'll switch into reverse for you. Or if you pulled backwards into a parking spot and you hit your foot on the brake, it says, would you like to go forward out of this spot? It's been pretty good so far, but it hasn't been enabled for, it's not a feature that will work when you're not in park. So some people were asking about like, oh, do a K-turn where it automatically guesses when you want to switch. It doesn't do that at all yet. So yeah, you're pretty much living on the screen with the swipe to go into drive or into reverse. So yeah, that's pretty much my initial impressions from just a few days. My big question now is going to be like, okay, people getting this car now, I mean, this is one of the very first Plaid Model S deliveries. Are there going to be Tesla enthusiasts and people who are really excited about it and people who will probably mostly say very good things about the yoke? How long before a bunch of other Model S's and long-range S's and X's ship where, you know, people who don't have this same level of enthusiasm get these, and will they consider it a mistake or a win? Tesla doesn't roll things back too often, and I'm really curious if they ever start to offer a regular wheel and stalks option in this car. I'll leave you with this. My ideal version of this would actually, I wouldn't take the regular wheel back. At this point, I would take the yoke plus regular clicking buttons. So we'll see how long Tesla runs with this. It's always funny because they're like the one car company that is very willing to try all kinds of strange things that haven't been done in cars before. Seems like they're running with the yoke for a while. The Cybertruck seems to have a yoke steering wheel. The Roadster also seems to be coming up with a yoke steering wheel. But I also think about like, what are the stuff that they come up with in their labs somewhere that they were like, no, this is too crazy. We can't put it in the car because it would have to be pretty wild. Anyway, I'm gonna review this car. All right, I'm gonna keep driving it daily. I'll break down all the plans and things that I alluded to in the beginning of the video because there's a lot more to it. But let me know in the comments section what you think of this new control center, this cockpit, and I will continue to drive and test and answer questions in the comments and on Twitter as I do. Until the next one, thanks for watching. Catch you guys later. Peace.